Joe's Inner Child Podcast.
Welcome back. Today's conversation is with the amazing and extremely intelligent cultural leader and teacher from Hawaii, Hinaleimoana Wong-Kalu, also known as Hina. We talk about how she's considered Mahu, which in Hawaiian is considered a traditional third gender person who occupies a quote-unquote place in the middle between male and female. We talk about her filmmaking with Joe Wilson and Dean Hamer and the new film Kapaemahu. This is one of the most touching chats that we have had to date on this show, and I honestly believe that anybody who listens to it will feel at least a little bit more wholesome afterwards. And I'm sure you'll learn a thing or two. So check it out and enjoy your holiday.
Literary Joe's Inner Child Podcast.
Have you always known about Mahu in your life because of where you're from, or is it something that you learned more about as you found your own gender identity and aged?
Coming from the perspective of being Hawaiian in my own homeland, I always wondered why I didn't hear more Hawaiian language spoken, why there wasn't more cultural anything present. Yet I was raised in a Hawaiian household and in a Chinese household. My dad's side is Chinese. My mom's side is predominantly Hawaiian. And I am born in 1972. So being a product of those years means that both my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation are Hawaiians, that were not taught to know our culture. My grandparents knew, but they did not have the privilege and the benefit of language at their disposal. They heard their parents speaking it, but they were not required to engage in it. And so they took on every element that was English speaking, Western and American. And what that translates into, to answer your question, is that the concept of Mahu, even in just a social climate of the home, it was not something that was just, oh, and this is how you are. I remember my mother struggled with that understanding. She struggled when I told her along the way different things in my life that had to do with what the world of the West calls LGBT. And at those junctures, it was always a challenge. And that's because my mother grew up in a predominantly Western American setting. So therefore, it was not something that she looked favorably upon. If my mother had been in a more Hawaiian environment, then she would have received it differently. When I first told my mother what was going on in my life at 18, this is before I transitioned, but I told her that I was seeing someone. It wasn't a girl, et cetera, et cetera. And the first person she went to was her father. And then I guess he must have got agitated by that, because then he went to my grandmother, whom was my everything. And my grandmother turned around and let my grandfather have it. And she immediately drove to me where I was in town and told me that no matter what, was on my plate, no matter who I was to be in my lifetime, that she would always love me. She drove into town half an hour away to tell me that.
And that's probably a big part of why you share that voice now in all of your projects. Was she the one that told you, introduced you to the word Mahu? Because obviously, because of the way things have been watered down, like you said, in Hawaiian culture, it seems like your mom wasn't really familiar with that.
No, it wasn't my mother's. It wasn't her calling. It was not her role. It wasn't her place. It wasn't. It by right should have been, but Hawaii is so governed by America and all of its influences in so many ways that there's no escaping it.
I understand that there is this is actually is this the fifth film that you've worked on with them, or I know they've done five, but I know you worked on at least one other with Dean and Joe.
Yes, so Kumuhina, where I was their subject, but I was actually just by default in engaging with them. They shared with me what they hoped to capture, and I said, "Oh, well, if you want to capture those kind of moments of my life, then you're gonna have to do this, and you're gonna have to do that, and this, and that, and this, and you're gonna have to go over there, and you're gonna have to be with me when I do this, this, and this." And so that's what happened. So I was actually directing, to a certain degree while I was a subject, because I had to ask them, what do you need? What do you want? What are you trying to show?
Right.
So Kumuhina, and then then the small offshoot project, A Place in the Middle, and then the Rogers. I consulted with them, but they're producer director on it. That was the film from Samoa, dealing with the male trans element there. Then there's Ladies in Waiting from Tonga, and its small offshoot, Lady Eva. And then Kapaemahu, and now we are working on Kapaemahu, another animated film.
Okay. When is that new one that you mentioned coming? Is that going to be something in 2021, or you don't know because you're still in production?
We're still in production. Likely it may come out at the same time as the opening of our Kapaemahu.
Nice. How would you say Kapaemahu, I guess I want to focus on that one. How would you say that has advanced from the things you learned from the other four series, either based on what you learned by making them or what you learned by the actual reception that people took, the message they took from what you were trying to give?
It just really helped me to focus with each passing project. It helped me to focus on what exactly was my message going to be? What was actually going to be my purpose? And I don't think necessarily I've really veered from my purposes, but I was able to actually see better and understand better the necessity to tell a story, but the ability now, especially with animation, to condense things that in a real life film where we look at real people, you'd have to set the scenario up in certain ways, and it takes a whole lot longer. Whereas in Kapaemahu, the animated portion, the takeover of the United States of Hawaii by the United States was done in 2 seconds. And it was simply having an animation of the the scene of the beach, Waikiki, and then the Hawaiian flag billowed for 1 second, and then it disappeared off screen, and then the American flag came billowing in.
And I like that it's only, I think the whole short is only under 8 minutes long. I think
Yes.
that will help. Today's generation is so used to binging or like listening or watching shorter media, and I think that people have a smaller attention span. So I definitely think by doing shorter films, trying to get a message like this across, it will hopefully reach the people of this generation.
Yes.
I want to let Nick ask a question or two because I talk an awful lot, and I could go all day. So I'm going to let Nick hop in.
I have to tell you that I'm enjoying this interview because your questions are excellent.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Actually, Nick, before you go, Hina, I noticed that when I was looking up information on you, that there's another name you go by. Is it not Maku? Is it Maku Hina? Or
Kumu.
Kumu? Sorry. Which
Kumu
would you
Hina.
prefer? Which would you prefer that we call you or credit you as?
For official things, I use my whole name, Hinaleimoana Wong-Kalu.
Okay. Cool.
Kumu Hina is a term of respect and honor here in Hawaii to be addressed by my community as Kumu. It means teacher, Kumu, Kumu. And so, you know, people will give deference, they'll show respect, they'll give honor. Usually it comes with, you know, a lot of the little things like, oh, Kumu, and they you know, people cater to you, and they end up they just put you up on a little pedestal, so to speak, a lot of the times. And I only feel that that should be invoked if necessary. You know, right now you can interview Hinaleimoana.
Okay, awesome. I like that. And you have a beautiful, wonderful name. I love it. But now I'm going to pass on to Nick.
Thank you. Yes, so I just wanted to say, like, I think this might be the first time on our show that we've had an educator, so I'm very excited about that. And I was just wondering, you said that when you were growing up that your family it was more Americanized than you would have expected to be learning all the things that you've learned already. So I was wondering, like, what was your journey to learn about the culture of Hawaii in general and how it led you to Kapaemahu?
So I grew up in a world where there was always access to Hawaiian music. And it was always played in the background, or you would go to family gatherings or, you know, social settings. And in the 70s, there was still a very good amount of Hawaiian music played. Okay. It's not so much now. But that had always, you know, left me wanting more. And by the time I got to high school, I remember seeing two older high school students. I was a freshman and they were junior and senior, and they were having a full-on conversation in Hawaiian language. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I need to be doing. And so it started my journey on pushing to learn more. And so Mahu, learning about Mahu, I was called Mahu from the time I was young, and I did not like it. And it was hurtful. It was used in a derisive way. You know, and when the word is applied pejoratively to you, the individual, it stings. And I was ashamed of that word. You know, whereas now I have had to come full circle and embrace it completely.